Welcome back to AP Television. Today, we're going to dive into one of the most fundamental concepts in international economics: comparative advantage and gains from trade. These ideas are at the heart of why countries engage in trade, and they explain how everyone, nations, businesses, and even individuals can benefit from trading with one another. This topic accounts for 5 to 10% of the AP Macroeconomics exam, so it's crucial to understand. In this video, we'll break down three main concepts: absolute advantage, comparative advantage, specialization, and gains from trade. We'll look at simple examples, graphs, and real-world scenarios to help you understand these ideas. By the end of this video, you'll know how to use data from production possibilities curves, PPCs, and tables to determine comparative advantage and calculate mutually beneficial terms of trade. Let's get started. Economics is all about choices, specifically how individuals, businesses, and countries decide to use their scarce resources to satisfy their unlimited wants. In a world where resources are limited, choices must be made about what to produce, how to produce it, and who gets to consume the goods. These decisions are at the core of microeconomics and macroeconomics. While microeconomics looks at the behavior of individual markets, macroeconomics focuses on the economy as a whole. Today, we're going to focus on international trade and how countries make decisions about what goods to produce and trade with others. Let's start with the concept of absolute advantage. Absolute advantage refers to a country's ability to produce more of a good or service than another country using the same amount of resources. For example, if country A can produce 10 tons of wheat with 1 unit of labor, while country B can only produce 3 tons with the same amount of labor, then country A has an absolute advantage in wheat production. But does that mean country A should produce everything by itself? Not necessarily. To really understand why trade is beneficial, we need to look beyond absolute advantage and focus on comparative advantage. Now, here's where things get interesting. Comparative advantage is a more powerful concept, and it explains why countries should specialize in certain goods and engage in trade, even when one country is better at producing everything. Comparative advantage means that a country can produce a good or service at a lower opportunity cost than another country. In other words, it's not just about being the most efficient overall, it's about which country gives up the least when choosing to produce one good over another. Let's break this down with a simple numerical example. Country A is better at producing both goods, but it has to give up 2 units of cloth for every 1 unit of wheat it produces. Country B, on the other hand, only has to give up half unit of wheat for each unit of cloth it produces. So, country A has a comparative advantage in wheat, and country B has a comparative advantage in cloth. By specializing, country A in wheat and country B in cloth, both can trade and consume more than if they tried to produce everything on their own. This brings us to the idea of gains from trade. When countries specialize in the goods where they have a comparative advantage, they can engage in trade and both benefit. This allows them to consume beyond their production possibilities, meaning they get more goods and services than they could by producing everything themselves. To see this visually, we can use a production possibilities curve, PPC. The PPC shows the maximum combination of 2 goods that a country can produce with its available resources. If countries specialize in trade, they can move beyond their own PPCs and access more goods. Let's look at an example on the graph. Country A can produce a certain amount of wheat and cloth, while country B can produce a different combination. By trading, both countries move outside their individual PPCs, showing that trade allows them to consume more than they could produce alone. Let's think about how this applies to real life. Imagine 2 friends, Sarah and Jack. Sarah is great at writing code, while Jack excels at graphic design. Now, Sarah could design graphics too, but it would take her longer than Jack. Just as Jack could code, but he'd be slower than Sarah. It makes sense for Sarah to focus on coding and for Jack to focus on graphic design because each has a comparative advantage in their task. By specializing and trading their services, they both get more done in less time. This example mirrors how countries work together. Even if one country is more productive overall, it can still benefit by specializing and trading with others. To summarize, today we covered Absolute advantage, the ability to produce more goods with the same resources. Comparative advantage, the ability to produce goods at a lower opportunity cost. Specialization and gains from trade, how focusing on what you do best and trading allows countries to consume more than they would alone. These concepts explain why international trade creates win-win scenarios. Countries that specialize in their comparative advantages can increase overall production and consumption, improving everyone's well-being. As you move forward in your study of macroeconomics, consider how these concepts apply to current global trade issues and policies. Next, we'll explore how trade impacts economic growth and why some countries may impose trade restrictions. Make sure to subscribe to AP Television so you don't miss it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.